Be talking about 9/11 and the 9/11 Memorial Plaza, and I have two gentlemen who were part of the service to the country during that horrible time, and we're going to bring up some of the experiences that they had and what they did trying to save lives. So stay tuned for LiveWire right after this. As the 20th year passes of the remembrances from the 9/11 disaster, I have with me in the studio David Baldwin and Chris Costamanga. Did I get it right? Close. I was close. Yeah. Okay. Who are both with the fire department, the Sacramento Fire Department. They are chiefs with the fire department, but also have been around long enough to have been sent by the department to work at in New York at the 9/11 occurrence. So I've actually never talked to anybody who was there. I did know someone who was in the buildings and he didn't make it out. There are people who are watching us now who really don't know what happened. What was it all about? What is 9/11? You know, why do we call it 9/11? What even with that? A lot of people, you can walk down the street and ask them if they knew that, and they don't. So why don't we describe it? What happened?
Well, I guess you could start by saying the day started, and a lot of people talk about it this way. The day before was a real rainy day, a Sunday that it rained hard in New York. And the next morning, Monday, it rained really hard. Tuesday morning, September 11th, so 9/11, it was a beautiful Tuesday morning in New York, and people were starting their days. And then the planes that were hijacked started by striking the towers. And
these are the Twin Tower buildings that were there.
World Trade Center 1 and 2, the tallest or second tallest buildings in the country at the time. And at first people didn't know what was happening. And you'll see cuts to the president in a second grade classroom in Georgia being notified. This is a lot of stuff that we didn't see right away. But the nation was under attack, and but not from a sovereign state. It was a group, so we didn't know that then. And we have a team in Sacramento that it's our main thing to go and rescue people in urban situations where there's a collapsed building. And before it was earthquakes, natural disasters, or acts of domestic terrorism, which Dave has been to Oklahoma City as an act of domestic terrorism. And now it's an act of foreign terrorism attacking our country. So
you're part of a team that you're from this part of the world. They came and got you and took you over there.
Yeah, there's 28 teams that train together. We have like tools and equipment across the country. There's 3 regions, East, Central, and West, and approximately, 7 teams per region. Some have a little bit more than others, making up the 28 teams that we have today. And we can converge on any large incident or disaster. So I talk about Oklahoma City You have 9/11, Katrina, the hurricanes, Harvey, Sandy. So just about anything that the nation needs, first responders that have trained a career in search and rescue, we can respond to and help manage a situation for the local entities that have been overwhelmed. And that day, New York City had been overwhelmed.
Yes. These
And the
these
nation.
two buildings were, there were 1,000.
3,000 people perished on that day. 343 firefighters were there. And you had the Port Authority, you had NYPD, civilians, journalists, everybody are part of that 3,000 people. So you don't know that, though. We're leaving town. When we were leaving town here in Sacramento, we had no idea how many people were lost, missing, trapped at that time.
And so they flew you there, and what happened? What did you do?
Yeah, so the FEMA teams, which is one of the teams, the 28 teams, is our main mode of transportation through the air is through the military.
Mm-hmm.
So that morning we assemble it at where we keep our cache, is what we call where all our tools and trucks and everything is. And we load up and we transport ourselves to Travis Air Force Base. And then we go through a whole check-in process at the base, and they put us on, I think a C5 is what we flew. We flew, so they load all of our gear on a C5, and then we get transported to what the closest military base that the incident is at. It was as we're doing the load-up process, you're really not paying attention to the news, and it really wasn't until we got to Travis, we had a little bit of time before we loaded the plane that we actually, at least for myself and many of the other team members, it was the first time we actually saw the footage of the news of the towers coming down. And that was 4, 5, 6 hours after the incident. So we were so focused on getting our gear ready and preparing for the mission that you honestly just don't have time to watch the news.
So here's some of the slides.
Yeah.
Of what that.
That's a picture right there of what they would call World Trade Center, Building 7. It was a complex of buildings, and the space that it was built on only allowed them to go so high with the two towers, and then the other buildings had to be shorter.
Mm-hmm.
Or not as tall. And that's actually one of the towers. You can see the base of the towers. They look like tuning forks.
Mm-hmm.
And it had like an exoskeleton the way it was built to achieve the height that they achieved. So, and that's looking from what you'll hear, the pit or the pile referred to, and looking out. And we did work that was, well, again, this is looking back from another building. You see the Verizon building on the right with the hose streams coming out of it.
Yes.
And you have two buildings there, the two towers that are reduced to about 12 stories worth of rubble. They were 110 stories tall, and they were reduced to about 12 stories of rubble. I think that's the Winter Garden.
Yeah, that's inside. Yeah.
So that's inside the buildings to the west of the towers.
Two 40 stories.
Yeah, and they're 40-story buildings looking out at the sky, and it's called the Winter Garden Complex.
Yes.
And in the back of this one, you see the Woolworth building, part of, I think it's the North Tower you see there, part of it. The Woolworth building is a more Gothic building on the left. At one time, it was one of the tallest buildings in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
And then this again is, looks like building World Trade Center 5.
Looks like
Yeah.
5, yeah.
This is where who was in that building? The trades, and they had a lot of different buildings around the complex, and there was also a mall that connected all the buildings. You also had the pathway trains came in from New Jersey to the World Trade Center complex, which became a real important part of that day because on 9/11, 2001, there was an operator working for the Transit Authority that stopped trains because he was working in 1993 during the first bombing. So
Yes.
he's accounted for saving a lot of people's lives that morning because he didn't let him into the Trade Center as soon as the first plane hit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's good. Well, a lot of people acted fast in that, and
yeah.
there could have been many, many more. But and then it was your job to go in there and see who you might be able to save.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we practice and train for the scenario where there's some sort of collapse, there's a void space. We do a quick search, and if we have to breach using our tools to extract victims, that's the base of our training.
Mhm.
And that's what we expected to do when we got there. We had a similar experience in Oklahoma City where it was that pancake and void spaces. So we're like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
should be a lot of void spaces to search. And you always going in assuming that you're going to be finding survivors. And it wasn't, you never give up hope, but it was about day 4 or 5 you kind of realize that, man, it's grim.
Grim,
The
yeah.
survivability is really low.
Yeah.
It was interesting that as we're searching the void spaces and getting into these offices and whatever, you didn't even find office furniture. I mean, it was either dust, rubble of concrete, or paper, and that was like the only things that survived, and of course the steel.
Yeah.
The only thing that survived the collapse. So it was eerie that we're not finding large rubble or
Right.
debris fields that you would typically associate as a 110-story building full of furniture.
Yeah, there's a good shot of the disaster.
Yeah.
And inside that, we found stairwells, we found places where we would typically find, there's stairwells have more steel around them.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So you create a void space easier, and we couldn't find anything. And like Chief Baldwin says, 3-4 days into it, we were
Yeah.
starting to realize that we just weren't finding anything. Everything was
Yeah.
pulverized.
Yeah.
You had bare metal. The rebar had no concrete on it. Just signs of, and you couldn't find concrete the size of your fist. It was all pulverized. No glass.
Yeah.
All the glass was pulverized. That's the Verizon building again. You'll see
Yes.
shots of that in later days with a really big flag on it.
Yeah.
That was early in the
Early
incident.
on. And what was eerie for us is we got on they call it the pile. We got on the pile the morning of the 12th after flying all night.
Mm-hmm.
And our first mission was to scout and recon and rescue in building 5 or 6, I forget which
Yeah, it was
one.
fine.
And on our SCBAs, we have these devices called a pass device that,
SCBA's.
yeah, self-contained breathing, the bottles that we breathe air
Oh, that's
in on
right.
fires. And they have a built-in alarm, so if you stop moving after 30 seconds, it alarms telling your buddies that he isn't moving. And a day later, we got on the pile and we were still hearing these alarms sounding.
Yeah.
So we're like, oh, the alarm's sounding, we can find this guy.
Yeah.
And
No way.
No way. That was eerie.
So this experience, though, I mean, it must have an effect on you. And were there some help given to you guys when you came back?
Yeah, they offered. It was optional.
Yeah.
Behavioral health is a big thing in the fire service right now, but 20 years ago, it wasn't a thing at the time. Some people, I think, had reached out. It's, of course, very private.
Yes, sure.
For me, no, I was just glad to be home and, see
Yeah.
the family.
I want to thank you guys for telling me this, and I think it's important that we hear stories about this as we go through the next 20 years.
Yeah.
20 years, it seems like it's been just happened in a way. Thanks so much for talking to me, and I wish you two health, and we will take a short break now.
Thank you.
Okay. We're going to take a short break. We'll be back in just a minute. We'll be talking with Rick Pickering, who is the CEO and the head of the Cal Expo, and he's going to talk about the September Memorial Plaza that was built for 9/11. Right after this.
Brandon met a girl on a dating app. He finally found the courage to ask her out. No answer. He started to panic. Was he being...
Hey, sorry I didn't respond. I was driving.
She must be a keeper.
When I never graduated from high school, I realized I wanted to go back to school because I didn't want to work these back-breaking jobs the rest of my life. With the help of my father and having my son, that was all the motivation that I needed to come back to school. I felt accomplished, made me feel that I could take on whatever challenges life throws at you.
Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org.
I want to eat apples and bananas. I need to eat apples and bananas. Why can't I eat apples and bananas?
Support the Feeding America nationwide network of food banks to help provide meals to those in need. Join us at feedingamerica.org.
Hi, I'm Ray Tatter. We're back. We're talking about the September Memorial Plaza, and with me here in the studio is the CEO of Cal Expo and producer of the State Fair and any number of events that occur throughout the year there. And there are events still going on there right now. We'll be talking a little bit about them, but we really are here to talk about the Cal Expo September Memorial Plaza, which is, there's an event coming up. We want you to know it'll be on September 11th at 8, begin at 8 a.m. Is that correct, sir?
Yes, Ray. Well, thank you very much for having us on LiveWire, and for all of your listeners and viewers. They have the opportunity this Saturday morning to come out to Cal Expo. The September 11th Memorial Plaza will be open from roughly 7:30 in the morning until noon, but from 8 to 9 in the morning is a very somber memorial service. It's not a celebration by any standard. It is remembrance of heroes. More than 3,000 people perished, 3,000 Americans perished back on September 11th in 2001. And members of the Cal Expo State Fair Board felt it was important to do something to honor. There was such a sense of national pride and unity that came from such a terrible attack on American soil. Yes. They actually took a trip to New York City and selected the largest possible I-beam from the Trade Center that could be transported cross-country on a train. So it was a 125,000-pound steel I-beam from the tower. It was trained all the way to Roseville, but it had to be cut in half. It had to be welded in half in order to fit on semi-trucks and delivered to Cal Expo.
I see.
So it was quite a feat to make that happen. So when the State Fair opened in 2002, that was the unveiling of those I-beams.
I see.
So bringing a part of what took place in New York to California, and in memory of the more than 3,000 people who perished, there is a large sphere that floats on a pond of water, and it moves, and it has it has all 3,000 plus names engraved in granite.
Yes, it's very beautiful. I'm looking at a picture of it here. I don't know if you could see that there are names engraved. Whoops, not there, there. And you can visit. Can you visit this at any time?
Well, it's open during the annual State Fair, the 17 days each July of the State Fair, and then it's opened on September 11th. So it'll be open to the public this Wednesday. There will be a special ceremony. There's a part of the exhibit that is a tribute in recognition and honor of the people who died at the Pentagon when Flight 77 crashed into the Pentagon.
Yes.
It's another part of the memorial exhibit that's a tribute and an honor for the people that died on Flight 93 that crashed into the ground in Pennsylvania. The names of the flight crew and the brave men and women that took that plane down before it could strike another American target.
That's right.
So this is all done through a September 11th California State Fair nonprofit foundation. So people brought together funds, particularly from the Sacramento region, and made this happen and placed it at Cal Expo in perpetuity for the history of the people of Sacramento to remember. There were Californians that lost their life. There were Californians such as the two chiefs before me who went back to New York in an effort to assist with the rescue efforts. The connection East Coast to West Coast was phenomenal at that time. And what we find when we do this memorial program each year, we have parents that bring their children because their children weren't alive 20 years ago. And we have schools that come out and homeschoolers that come out and help educate their family. But what's most touching to us is we have survivors from 9/11 and people who are alive today who lost loved ones, lost friends in New York City. And I think everybody, all of your viewers today, if we ask them if they're over the age of, say, 20 to 21, can they remember where they were when they saw the video footage of the first plane crashing into the tower and the second plane into the tower? Do they remember those emotions, that sense of bewilderment, disbelief, unbelief? How could this happen? And then when they saw, later that day, the plane that crashed into the Pentagon and then the plane that went down in the farmer's field in Pennsylvania, and then the sense of national unity that came about at that point in time. And here we are 20 years later, still remembering not only the tragic loss of life, but the bravery of the Americans that rushed into the buildings in an effort to save others and, in fact, lost their own lives. So public safety, from fire to police to port authority to transit officials to everyday citizens that became, heroes trying to save their fellow man.
Can we look at a short video and that'll show us the memorial?
Absolutely.
Okay, let's have a look at that. Thanks very much. Here we go. So Rick, you're the CEO and the general manager, so you work with the board of directors, and were you there when they said, no, we have to do something?
No, I came to Cal Expo after the fact, but have been honored to keep this memory alive. Yes. This, along with more than 100 events each year, and more than 3 million people come through Cal Expo each year to a variety of activities. Yet, of all the things we do, this is one of those things that is heartwarming and is unifying.
Yeah, and so it's the 9/11 Memorial, and you folks can go there on September 11th. It's between 8 and 12.
Yes.
And it's over, and which gate is the best gate?
The main gate, so walk by the California letters. Okay,
good, that's a good thing. All right, and you can always learn more about it by getting on the web.
Yes.
And it's Cal Expo.
You just type in the term Cal Expo, it will self-populate.
Okay, and it'll tell you how to get there and what's happening there. And it's the I-beam is an amazing symbol because that's all we could see what was left, and parts of the building hanging over the city, and just names coming across the screen. It was just a heartbreak, my father was talking about how he remembered when the war started in Hawaii, the Western War, with the bombing of
many people have compared the World Trade Center bombings to the Pearl Harbor bombings.
Yeah. So it's interesting, and I think it's fitting that right in the middle of a place where we celebrate things, that this memorial is built, I think, too, don't you? And I think that must have been one of the important decisions, that at the same time to express our freedoms and enjoy car racing, whatever, the creative things that people do, and a heck of a good hot dog. We can at the same time note that we're there because of the strength of our country.
Absolutely. There's many things that may cause us to have different points of view and different opinions, different political philosophies, but a tragedy such as 9/11, at that point in time, I remember very well that it was sadly a point of unification across the nation.
Yes, no doubt about that. No doubt about that. And it goes along with, of course, the idea that Sacramento, it is the place where people got off the train from wherever countries, all of Europe, and the port that they landed from all over here. And our town is the most diverse town, and it's got lots of people who suffered during either the wars or, and this was a kind of war against what we represent in terms of freedom. And it's an amazing piece of work for us here on the West Coast to have this, for people to visit. And what's the event like on this?
Well, the event's very sombering. There will be a small handful of speakers. We put this program together with our Mexican-American Combat Veterans Organization.
Yes.
Phil Rios and his group do an outstanding job. There'll be a speaker representing the city, the county, Congress. We'll have a representative. The governor will have a statement that will be read for all those that are in attendance as well, just commemorating the bravery of the people of California that not only were there rescuing when it happened, but the resources that went there from Sacramento and from the state of California in an attempt to find more survivors.
Rick Pickering, thank you so much for coming to talk to me about this, the September Memorial Plaza at Cal Expo, and the event coming up on September 11th. All right, we'll be back next week with LiveWire. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you then.
Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.